Hi, my name is Mona Jamshed, and I'm going to introduce you to a series of lectures on a software engineering course called Requirements Engineering. I delivered this course to a group of students of Bachelors of Software Engineering at University of Adelaide in the year 2022. This course covers the foundation of requirements specification of a software product. I taught the course in different sections, and it started from understanding requirements specification, understanding the client's needs, analyzing those needs, testing and validation of those needs, prototyping, and management. The slides that I have used have originally been prepared by Professor Dagmar Monnet, who is a professor of computer sciences at the Berlin School of Economics and Law. She has very kindly provided these slides for teaching purposes and has also allowed the modification. So a slight modification has been done to suit the needs of the students. I've tried to teach this course in a very basic manner using everyday examples. I hope you enjoy this series and you're able to learn something about requirements engineering. Also, you will be seeing this clip at the beginning of each of the lectures that I'll be uploading under this lecture series. Happy studying. Requirement elicitation techniques. In this workshop, we are going to spend some time mainly on the elicitation techniques that we touched upon like last week as well. But before that, we have a bit of discussion about the user classification, and yeah, we'll go through as you see the slides. All right. So I'm going to start off with Dilbert. That's like the creator of Dilbert. As you know, he takes a satirical turn on many of the organizational issues, and this one is basically about it highlights the importance of the gathering requirements, why it's so important. So this is what it says. Wally, we don't have time to gather the product requirements ahead of time. So the boss tells him, I want you to start designing the product anyway. Otherwise, it will look like we aren't accomplishing anything. And Wally's like, of all my projects, I like the doomed ones the best. So, so what they're trying to show here is that this developer, like Wally, he's either like a poor developer or he's a lucky developer because he doesn't have any work to do. Why? Because he does not have the requirements at hand. So as I said, this comic strip is mainly showing you the importance of the step of gathering the requirements. So yeah, the main topics for today, we are covering requirements elicitation. What are the key actions in elicitation? Ali touched upon this in the last this session, that why we call it elicitation now and not just gathering of requirements. I'm going to talk briefly on that. Then what are the techniques and planning activities for a single elicitation session? What are some of the cautions and good practices? We'll try to cover as much as possible in this 1 hour that we have. All right, so I hope you're all familiar with this framework. This is something that we discussed last week, and this framework is really important, not that just in terms of highlighting the various steps that you can see that makes this requirements development process, but what makes this important is it highlights the importance of iteration, that it shows that it's basically a cyclic process, and it's something that you need to keep on going back and forth from one step to the other to get clarifications, confirmations, in order to have a high chance of project success. So some important points to remember is that even though like these activities are the key parts of this framework, but the important thing is that they have a lot of interaction and a lot of input that they provide to each other. And for example, in the first step, elicitation, when you go to analyses, when you're classifying and you're giving a more deeper meaning and you're evaluating the the quality of what you have discovered in your elicitation. You may need some clarification, and you can always go back. And then from analyses, you can go to your specification where you do the documentation. And if you find that there are any gaps that are not making any sense to you, go back to your users, and then so on and so forth. So at every stage, you're open to going back, getting clarifications done, getting confirmations done, so that you have as much validated product at the end of your process as possible. So this particular session, as we are only going to highlight elicitation, the process of identifying and discovering the techniques. So identifying and discovering. Now, Ali also mentioned that elicitation basically is not just a matter of gathering, the word gathering techniques. It's not that you are just going to transcribe what your user is telling you, right? And you bring that interview or whatever thing that you have conducted. And basically, this process is where you are talking about, sorry, I just got a bit lost. So where you are talking about discovering, and you're talking about critically analyzing, identifying, defining what the user is saying, and trying to make as much meaning out of it as possible. So, right, so if you just bear with me for a second, I am trying to see. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go through the definition. It's a process where you are identifying, discovering requirements from various sources, and through interviews, workshops, focus groups, observations, document analysis, and other mechanisms. So I think what's really important in this is that you try to put meaning to the requirements that you are gathering from your users at this stage. So you're trying to discover some things that, for example, you may discover through the gathering of this data that there may be some processes that your customer is using in the present system that are not really required in the new software that you're going to build for them. So as I said, that probably you're going to try to understand the thought processes which are behind the requirements that the users are stating. What are the thought processes? You're trying to walk through that entire process that your client follows to make decisions at their work, and you're trying to understand the logic behind it. So yeah, so basically, if there's one point that you can gather from this definition is that it's not just the transcribing of the requirements, rather it is a process where you are putting some analyses as well, and you're trying to understand why the system must perform certain functions and not some other functions. So that's why I mentioned the, so you may find that some of the processes that your client is using, they are either quite obsolete and they should not be incorporated into the new system. And I just want to highlight the importance of this stage, because it can be quite prone to errors if it's not done the right way, and it's a very challenging stage where if you go to for example, if you go to a company, the head of the research department, and he just in the first meeting, I just read this actually from your book that that has been referred for this course, and the only time that they have is probably that one meeting, and they just say, okay, we have a new audit coming and I want these steps to be upgraded. But then at the back of your mind, you have that I want to get in touch with the people who are actually using your present system to see what exact problems they are facing and what kind of issues they have and what new things that they want. So that will be quite a challenge, because then you have to sort of get your idea through to the research head that that you're not just here to look at the big picture, but you really want to get down to the users who are going to use the system and work with them. So I mentioned the importance of good communication skills, like having some really soft, like as a business analyst, you really have to have good, not just software developing skills, but also soft skills where you are able to talk through your idea in a very open manner, and where you are able to not just talk to them in their language. I like this is really important, where you're not using a lot of technical jargon, which becomes difficult for your client to understand, because they would be talking about probably in a very layman manner as to what they are looking for. So yeah, now let's move on to the key actions in elicitation. So yeah, I'm just wondering if there are any questions to be raised at the moment. Because it's a bit awkward. I just have my presentation in front of me and I really can't see if there is any hand raised or anything. But yeah, for now, I'll just move on. We talk about the key actions in elicitation. Okay, now we talked about the first step is that we need to gather requirements, but for this, we need to know who are the sources of our requirement, right? Who are the people that will provide an insight into what they are looking for, and what should be developed, like who are those people that will tell me what needs to be developed, and where will I look for my requirements. So the first step, the key action in elicitation, the first key action is you identify the user classes, the product's expected user classes, and other stakeholders. So here you're probably, like the people who are actually going to use your product, and they're going to make their input in your product. And these are the people that you want to identify as the first step. So the different users as well as the stakeholders for this product. The next step would be, after you have identified the stakeholders, you're going to talk about what their goals are, what their expectations are, like, right? So what kind of functionality are they looking for? And main thing, is it aligning with the main business objective? Yeah, so a very important step, key action in elicitation is, again, learning about the environment in which the new product will be used. So for example, I'm going to take you now to Bangladesh. And just imagine that you have been, as a software developer company, you have been hired by a client who's in Bangladesh, and they are basically like a startup, agri-tech startup, and they are looking for making this mobile app for the farmers there, which will provide advisory support to the farmers. Now, it's really important that you learn in your elicitation stage as to what is the environment in which those farmers will be using that system. So at a time when, now, for example, the farmers may not be comfortable with the idea of using a technology in their farming, because as it is, Bangladesh being an agrarian country, so it's, they have these centuries-old farming techniques going on for a long time. And then would they be comfortable with the idea of using a mobile app to help them in the farming? And then would they have electricity problems? Would they be able to even charge their their mobile devices to use the system, this new mobile app? So all these things are really important. And then this may also help you identify another need, which would be that if we provide a very simple training program to the farmers, where they are able to see how their traditional knowledge and this innovation that you're bringing to them, they both coordinate and match, then maybe that's a good idea of introducing and making the farmers feel more welcome to using your mobile app. So so yeah, learning about the environment and as to who are the users, in what environment they are learning, Would this app just be for mobile phones, or would this also be used for like on PCs? And who are now, if your main client is like that startup agri-tech company, then maybe, and they are passing on this mobile app, so maybe they are just using the data that will be generated through the farmers when they use that app, and they will be using that. So all this really needs to be clear and needs to be a key action of your elicitation. It's not that you just talk about your stakeholders involved, what their goals are, but also the particular environment in which your app is going to be used. The next is working with individuals. Yeah, the people who are your actual users, to understand what their functionality needs are. So maybe the farmers who are working at the grassroots level, they may like to know about not so much about the soil condition, but they have they want to update themselves onto how they can do their trading at a competitive price. So because most of the time they don't earn enough profit margins, and yeah, getting to know what their functionality needs are for that mobile app and how it's going to help them, that's really important. And even at your client side, where like that agri-tech company that has contacted you, maybe talking to them that because if they plan to sell this app and they're not the direct users of this app, so talking to them on the lines that will the farmers have enough money to buy the app, or are you going to just give them free of charge? So all these, just imagine just being in a different environmental setup brings so many different needs for your product development. So yeah, depending on what your client is, what their business objectives are, where they are, what the environment that they are going to launch the new product, all these actions really form the key part of elicitation. So yeah, it all begins with identifying who the stakeholders are. So stakeholder, it's like here, I'm going to read out the definition, a very general definition. It involves everyone, a variety of stakeholders. So it's an individual or a group or an organization that is actively involved in a project, or it's affected by its process. So they may not be the direct user, but an indirect user, or can influence its process or outcome. And a very general definition, and the next slide will actually give you, again, it's from your book, it's going to give you really good example of how diverse and your stakeholders can be. So if you see at the very bottom, we see the developing team as a potential stakeholder. So these, I call them as your internal stakeholders. Why? Because they have internal, they are basically responsible for the development of the software, and they have internal interest of this project. So who are these people that the stakeholders who are your internal stakeholders? At the developing team level, they can be your tester, designer, developer, your database administrator, your project manager. So all of them also have a stake in this project that is going on. And of course, as we see above, that there are some people who are at the developing organization, stakeholders at the developing organization. So they can mainly be the marketing, the manufacturing people, the training people. And their roles are quite different to the developing team stakeholders slot, right? For example, I'll look at the quality assurance staff at the developing in the developing team. Now, what are they doing? They are mainly responsible for maintaining the quality attributes, internal and external quality attributes of the product. So they are responsible for, as we call, the maintainability of the product, right? They are there to fix the errors and basically maintain the quality of the product. So they may not have any interaction with the developing organization stakeholders, but as a developing team, every user in the developing team, every role in the developing team is an important stakeholder. So in case of quality assurance staff, they basically, they are responsible that they don't ignore any maintainability of the product. They maintain the quality of the product so that it doesn't become a very costly error at the end as we come to the handing of the project to your client. So then developing organization can be people who are responsible for the marketing, for the training of the people, the sales staff, the company owner, and then we have these people who are outside the developing organization. And here you can see two of them, like mainly that I'm going to talk about, the direct user and the indirect user. So direct user, I think at this stage I might try to invite some of you to speak up if you have any idea about who a direct user would be and who an indirect user would be. So if anyone is willing to chip in, just unmute and please let us know. So do I see any raised hands? If anyone wants to just reply, please let me know.
I think, Mona, it's good that to, bring up this slide, because it's important when we talk about that, such a large, basically percentage, of the reasons, for project failure come from the requirements engineering. So I think one of the most important responsibility of a requirement engineer is to identify the potential stakeholders. And in last session, as we discussed, that one of the risks in the requirements development is missing the key stakeholders, and if their requirements are missed, the project, the system, if you even develop, would never be used by the company, by that set of stakeholder.
Right.
So I think this is where this is a very good slide, and
right.
that can also help that relating example with the agriculture app for Bangladesh. Or I would say that's in any Southeast Asian countries. And look at that. As a requirement engineers, we also need to see, that how our system will play out in the different culture. For example, so that means if an agriculture app is developed for Australian farmers, just simply translating it in that one into Urdu, Hindi, Arabic, or Bangla would not work, because the stakeholders need to have a same level of education, literacy, and all kind of things.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. And coming on to the one of the examples of an important stakeholder is direct user and indirect user. So direct user would be someone who are actually directly, they are using that mobile app. So in this case, the farmers, they are directly interacting with with that app. And indirect user can be that agri-tech company, because they would be relying on the data that is generated, or the reports that are being generated through that, through the direct users, through the farmers. So it's all these stakeholders, we can't really overlook them. They're all really important. And even if that agri-tech company is not directly using your mobile app, it is just accessing its data and its services through other applications. So we cannot overlook them. So they are as important to us as the direct users. So yeah, that would be my message for this slide. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. And this one talks about, another comic strip. So basically, this one just highlights that it's really not easy to get in touch with stakeholders. And it's not just because, when stakeholders, as I said, at various levels, and there's such a variety of them, that you have to, you want to, as a developer, would try to, reach down to the, at the end user level. And sometimes when you have your meetings with the departmental heads, and they may not be that welcoming or open to the idea of having more meetings with you. So yeah, so this comic strip just highlights another extreme scenario. So I'm going to just read through it. So Dilbert's boss calls him and tells him that finish this project in 2 weeks and make sure you get input from all the executive stakeholders. So, and to be honest, executive stakeholders are really hard to get by because they are busy people. They have a lot of things on their agenda. So Dilbert says, that's impossible. And then he says, why? So Dilbert then says, let's call one of the 10 stakeholders and I'll show you. And then they get to hear all the recorded messages as they keep on calling these executive stakeholders. So one of them is like, this is Ed Pixton's voicemail, I'm not available ever. And then there's another voicemail they call, I'm either on vacation or sick or I'm traveling or I'm in a meeting and I do not check emails or return phone calls. Yeah, so, and then, like it ends on a really satirical note that despair is your only option. And then his boss says that you can try faxing him. Why don't you try that? That's one option left. So yeah, again, as I said, you have to keep this in mind. Obviously, this is not a real case scenario. It's just a satirical take on it. But yeah, stakeholders will say that they are busy and they may not like to see as much of you as you would want. All right, so let's move on. The next slide is about the customers. Now, who are the customers? Basically, the people who are going to benefit from your whatever product that you're making for them. And as we just went over the last slide, there can be a variety of these customers at every stage level. They can be your at the internal level, the marketing people, the customer, the company's head, and then moving on to the direct or the indirect user customer. So customers definition, I can say that it's so varied that it can be people who pay you for what you are building for them, but they may not ever use what you are building. So they're just investing. So there can be a variety of customers involved here. So this definition is that a customer is any individual or an organization that derives either the direct or indirect benefit from a product, right? So software customers may request, they may pay for, they may select, they may specify, use, or receive the output generated by a software product. All right, so covering all that we discussed in the last slide, this one, that they come in all shapes and sizes, right? They can come in all forms. So developing team, the developing organization, or people who are outside that organization. So maybe the agri-tech company, the startup company in Bangladesh might sell it in the market and maybe to other people, startups of the same kind. So yeah, different objectives and different reasons as to why they are your customers. All right, so the expectation gap. Now, this is something which highlights that without the importance of adequate customer input, right? Now, what this diagram here, this figure is showing is that in the beginning, where at the start of your product development or the requirement engineering process, what happens is that you both are on both the parties, like what the developer is seeking and what they understand and what the customer is has suggested or what they highlighted their needs. They all come together or converge at one point. But as time passes by, what happens? That difference, that gap keeps on increasing, keeps on growing, right? So this actually also highlights the reason of what Ali mentioned with you students, that around 30 to 40% of the software projects turn out to be complete failure, and that's one reason that there is an expectation gap. between what the customer actually needed and what the developer built. I'm going to show you a really nice strip here, comic strip here, which highlights what I'm talking about here. So let's just start reading it from the beginning. So the first photo shows how the customer explained it, right? And the second one shows what the project leader understood. All right, this is what we have to make. This is what they're saying. And then after eliciting, the analyses come and the analyst says, oh, this is how we have to design it. So he moves on and gives it to the programmer who says, this is what I have to program it like. And and then just see how the expectation gap from what the customer explained has resulted in that how the business consultant described it and how it was documented. It was nowhere what happened. And then, it goes on to say what operation was installed, how the customer was billed. Right here you can see you're giving a high invoice that they have to pay, and how it was supported. Well, nothing is there, and what the customer really needed at the end. So yeah, what better way to explain this slide of expectation gap between the customers as well as the developers, right? So I just added this because I thought this would really help you, this visual, to understand how badly things go wrong and how badly, because of these issues, because of the lack of customer contact, the lack of interacting with them, engaging with them at every stage, leads to complete disaster and failure of the project, right? And that shouldn't be really any surprise. So it's really important that you understand that customer contact points, the more you get in touch with them, the more you will be able to reduce the gap, minimize that gap, right? So, and this is what the next step is telling you. So in the beginning here, the gap where they're converging, and then as it started increasing, the first red triangle, it shows that here is a maximum gap, but it also tells you that, as you can see, that the successive triangles start getting shrinking in size. And why is that? Because this figure is showing that as time passes, the more you're able to get in touch with your customers, the more customer contact points you have, the more you will be able to reduce the gap. So just see the difference between this expectation gap when there is no customer engagement versus the expectation gap when there is customer engagement. And what is customer engagement? What can anyone tell me? How will you engage with your customer? Yeah? Would anyone like to just unmute and speak up? Okay, so how can you engage with your customers? What do you do in the first step when you are? So yeah, okay. So basically you're going to conduct interviews, conversations with them, and you're going to have as many requirement review sessions with them, as many, whatever prototypes that you have built, you're going to get them evaluated time and back so that you're able to reduce that gap and come up with a successful project. Because even research in software engineering highlights the rate of project failures are quite high because of this particular reason. And today, in fact, for the last 10 years, most of the applications that are being designed are quite user-centric. And wouldn't it be a sad scenario that user-centric mobile applications are not getting enough feedback from the customers, from the users who are actually going to use that application, and resulting in a failure? So it's really important that you have an interactive support with your customers and try to reduce this gap as much as possible. That way you're not going to just satisfy your customer, but you're also going to be more confident in what you're building is meeting with the requirements of the customer. All right. So classifying users, now I'll just mention something that here, just don't think of user as someone who has the same kind of needs, requirements and they are quite singular in their nature. No, they are not. We just touched upon that. Please keep that examples of potential stakeholders in your mind as you're thinking about your users. Because yeah, as I said, they come in all shapes and sizes. They are all kinds of people who are directly, indirectly going to be impacted by what you're going to build. So identifying and characterizing the different users for your product early on is going to help you elicit the requirements from your users, right? And I think something quite tempting at this stage may be that the software developer may think that, okay, maybe I can classify them only according to, like if they're dispersed geographically, so according to the geographical locations. But that's not the case. It has to be done according to their roles, according to their needs, what their characteristics are, right? And yeah, that's how you classify them. So I'm going to quote an example from the banking industry. Now, again, this example is from your course book. So there they say that if, as a software developer, you are charged with making a software for the banking industry, now you're going to see that there are many like what you call financial roles in this banking industry, or financial institutions, I would rather say, yeah, financial institutions in this banking industry. So these institutions can be your large size commercial banks, or they can be some commercial bank on a small scale, some savings and loans institute, or some credit unions. So they're all market players of the banking industry. And now you can't say that they are my different users. The user would be the one who is going to actually, what it is, the user is the one who is going to actually make an input in the application that you're going to do. So how we are going to classify user for this industry? Now, for that, you would see that there are certain roles in the banking industry or in these financial institutions that are uniform, in whether it's a large commercial bank, or it's a small commercial bank, or it's a credit union. So you walk into any of these different financial institutions, what will you find? That there will be a customer services officer, there will be a teller, there will be a business development officer, and they may have different like titles, but they would have the same roles to play, right? So you would be making your software for these roles. So the teller in each of these each of these market segments that we have, either a big commercial bank or a small commercial bank, would be dealing with the money, and customer service officer in any of these institutions would be dealing with the queries of their customers, while the business development officer and the loan application processing officer would be dealing with the new customers who are coming in, inquiring about the loans, loan products that they offer and all that. So it's really important that you classify the user according to the tasks that they are performing on that system, right? Don't assume that it's because they're geographically dispersed or they are in different market segments in that industry, so they are my different users. No, the user is the one who's going to work on that system that you're going to develop. So differentiating user class will be, for example, here, now again, this is from your book, and they have differentiated it according to different, some user classes will have access or they will have access to as an admin, while others would be just like a normal guest login. So administrator means that, you know, they have a certain, what do you call, an authorization. They have a certain right over others to control the system in a way that others don't. For example, they can just shut down the system, or they can configure all the accounts in the system, or the networks in the system. So they have a privileged access to that system. And then tasks performed. So you would be in the banking industry example, you would see, okay, a teller has a task to perform. I need to make a user class for a teller. I have a user class for a business development officer. I have a user class for a customer services. So whatever tasks are being performed, according to the business operation, you are going to build, differentiate your users according to that. And then different features would be part of those user classes, right? And yeah, for example, I'm going to talk about the experience, expertise. So maybe in your user class, you may say that, okay, there can be, I have to develop a system in a way, like for a new, who's someone who's quite new to the system. So I have to provide them with an interface that is quite friendly, that is not cluttered. You know, like they may have more menu, what do you call them? Like they may have easy to use graphical interface. They may have more menus, and then as you're working through they may get more, you know, like comfortable with your system that you have developed, and then they may say that we would like to have more keyboard shortcuts. We would like to have more customized operations for our, because we have become more experienced with it. So you have to keep these this kind of user class differentiation in your mind. And then what platforms and devices you're going to, that software that you're building is going to be used for. So for example, if it's a hospital industry and you're building like a health application, so is it just going to be used on the PCs of in a hospital, or they will also be accessed by the doctors on their smartphones, right? And yeah, and then you're going to also differentiate them as per the native language, like Ali mentioned, what culture you are going there, what language is used there. And of course, a very important thing, the direct and the indirect users. Who are the indirect users who would just be using this to generate data and generate reports, and who would be the ones who would be actually putting in their input in that system. So just keep these things in mind as you are trying to differentiate and as you're trying to classify your users. All right, so yeah, I'm going to just quickly go with, okay, I think I should move on to my next slide, which is, yeah, this slide sort of gives you a possible hierarchy, like how should we work, at what importance level should we focus on which user class. So at the top is like your main stakeholder, and within that stakeholder is your customer. Now, in that customer, you would have a direct user and indirect users. And then we talk about the direct and the indirect users are then classified as favored, disfavored, ignored, or other. Now, the next slide is going to talk about that. So favored user classes are your users who you must satisfy, because whatever requirements they are going to put out are going to meet with the project's business objectives, right? These are the people who are really important. We need to give a preferential treatment to them, because they will provide what we want, because what their requirements are going to define our product or our project scope. So they are the favored ones. And I think it doesn't really mean that people who are not paying for the system, who are paying for the system and not going to use for the system, they shouldn't be given a preferential treatment. So here the criterion should be basically that the requirements that are closely aligned with the project's business objectives are the requirements that you have to listen to most, and those users have to be given the preferential treatment. Now, the disfavored user classes would be like anyone. Again, I would just like to ask if anyone would like to answer who can be the disfavored user class. So it says they are not supposed to use the product for legal security reasons. We have to make it hard for them to reach out to the features of the system. So do you, can anyone mention?
Would that be people that aren't of a certain age? So for example, if the site was restricted to 18 plus people, then like minors would be disfavored.
Right. Age can be one criterion. And at the same time, you know, like who are the people who you do not want access? So in my mind, the first one comes are the hackers, right? We have to really make it hard for them, add so many security layers that they are unable to access the system. So they are disfavored users. And yeah, I mean, age, I agree with that. And at the same time, yeah, security can be one. And then disfavored also, I read from the book, actually, I'm going to just add here, can also be, for example, like in a company, you know, a software is introduced, a new software is introduced, and then after some time, the head of the company says that now I want to introduce some privileges where I'm going to give access of certain parts of the system to only a certain department, for example, like the HR department, and I'm not going to let the customer service department have access to all the you know, the private information of the customers. So that's where probably they're also the disfavored. So this can happen something later as well. Yeah, and we have to keep this thing in mind. So the next one is the ignored user classes. So they are the ones whose needs are really not to be prioritized. It doesn't mean that you don't have to, like you have to record what requirements they come up with, but then they are not the prioritized ones. So we they are quite interested in, like we are interested in their requirements, and we can always contact them later in our iteration process after we are done with our basic requirements, and we can always add them later. So yeah, so other user classes are those who are not favored, who are not ignored, or anyone who is not like disfavored, they can come in. Other user classes can, I think like from the, it can, even from the, like the chart that we discussed of the potential stakeholders, they can, any stakeholder can fit into these classes as well. So it can be from any level, like a procurement officer, or maybe, I don't know, like, I mean, other heads in the company that are not classified as favored, disfavored, or ignored can come in this. All right, I'm going to move on to, yeah, now the reaching agreement, the sign off. It's really important. Now, when you have so many people involved, like a list of stakeholders at one end, and then you have your developing team, your technical developing team at the other end. So how do we work through this? How, and is a consensus possible? So this slide tells us that that in Agile, it's really important that we start off, now Agile-based projects that we conduct, it's really important that we start off with with some reaching agreement. Now, Agile, as the term means, that we are open to ideas and changes, but at the same time, it means that we have agreed to certain basic requirements before we are always open for changes, but then we need a sign off, we need an agreement on certain things before we move on. So we have agreed on some of the basic requirements, the needs of the users, and the developers agree that yes, what you're saying is you know, it is feasible, it can be implementable, it can be made, it's testable. Testers agree that yes, we can do that. And yeah, so yeah, at the end you have an agreement which says that, okay, this is the needs, this has been agreed on, this is the agreed upon time, cost involved, and we agree to move on because these requirements are all achieving our business objectives. So a very agile approach, right? Here that we are adopting, that we are saying that we have agreed to certain minimum things, but we are open for changes. But a sign off here as it is, it's quite important. Again, yeah, so it's in this one, it says that if we want to succeed as a team, we need to put aside our own selfish interest and individual interest and start doing things my way. Now, basically, it's telling you that it doesn't have to be like this. It's not supposed to be like this. We have to try our best to address the needs of all stakeholders, right? So, okay, the what and how. I think this one is going to talk about, it's quite something that you're going to use as well in your course project. So you also have to come up with this product vision statement. And that would be basically very simple, that, you know, like what are the expectations of your product, and what do you want this product or this project to do, and what objectives it's going to achieve. So basically a bigger picture of what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? And so the product vision is a statement that describes a strategic concept, the big picture level, or the ultimate purpose and form of a new system that will achieve the business objective. So for example, if it's an airline company who wants to automate their check-ins at the airport, they may say that we want to introduce this automated check-in system because we want to reduce the check-in time by this much % in this much time frame. So you're giving concrete numbers to you're lacing up your product vision with concrete numbers. So yeah, it's what the product is about and what it ultimately could become, and it's usually quite stable. Project scope, now it's a very critical document, and you will also be working on this one, and it's usually part of the product vision. So both of these documents are, you know, can be on one page. And so the project scope, like in the real world, it's usually signed off by, you know, by very senior project managers, because here we have allocated all the responsibilities. We have outlined the boundaries, that the time, the cost boundaries, and yeah, so it's that portion of the ultimate product vision that the current project will address. So basically, while the product vision told you about the ultimate thing that you're looking for, the project scope can actually break it down into stages, like what are we achieving to hope, what are we hoping to achieve in the first stage and in the second stage, and yeah, usually quite variable, right? So this is where you talk about the commitment at various stages of the project. Okay, a lot of gaffes from me today, but anyway. Okay, techniques for eliciting requirements. I'm finding doing this, you know, on Zoom quite a bit weird because I can't see any one of you, so I'm really not sure what's happening, and I'm just talking to myself. But anyways, all right. Okay, I'm going to move on quickly, try to cover what the main topic of this class was, which is what are the elicitation techniques. So we talked about a few, like last class as well, interviews. You know, really important part of the agile projects that we hope that we are going to work on, because agile projects, through interviews, we are able to get you know, direct user involvement from our users, from our stakeholders. So they are quite easy to schedule and lead. Yeah, they're quite helpful when we don't have a lot of access to the user, right? But if, like even last time I mentioned that if I'm able to get like in half an hour with a very important user, critical user of this project, then I would readily go for an interview, because I know I can collect a really good amount of data from these interviews. And interviews, you may know, they can be structured or unstructured. So structured would be like a set of questions which are close-ended, you have already prepared, and you just ask those questions, and that's about it. Whereas unstructured, which I really prefer, are the open-ended questions. So where you may like to take, you know, you may like to do a follow-up question as to based on what your user is telling you. And I think a good interviewer will be one who is trying to make the most of the time that he has been given, because as it is, we discussed earlier as well, stakeholders are quite busy people, especially the executive stakeholders. So that's why, it says a useful tip is that you sort of develop a rapport, you introduce yourself. And I think another thing that I would say is that it's not just that the executive stakeholders are like, I'm not going to talk about at the company level only. So for example, if you want to build a project and you want your university students to be interviewed, so in order to like their immediate response may be that they don't want to help you with your project because they don't see any importance attached to it. So maybe if you are able to convince them and you invest that time in convincing why you're doing this project, so it's really important because, for you that you can do through establishing rapport, and because they may not see any need to help you in your course project, but through good soft skills, you're able to sort of convince them that it is. And then in interviews, it's important you stay in scope, you prepare questions ahead of time, and you listen actively. And in an open-ended interview, like in an unstructured interview, active listening is really going to help you do the follow-up questions, right? Okay, workshops. Okay, I'm going to suggest like a scenario here where we need to use workshops. So for example, if I say that I want to build a crime tracking app, so who can be my users, or who are the stakeholders involved in this app? Any ideas? We don't have enough time, so if we can anyone would like to chip in quickly, that would be really good.
And the other thing in Mona, I mean, it's fine that you roll over, I mean, that remaining main topics to the next session.
All right.
Because that would be quite fruitful that you get, if somebody want to go in depth. Yeah.
So should I cover this now or wrap it up?
It's up to you, basically. I mean,
yeah, okay. I think I can cover up. I can cover workshops today, till workshops.
Yeah, it's up to you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, okay, I'm going to answer this myself. So for now, you have been you have been tasked with this idea of building a mobile tracking app. A crime tracking app. Now, what do you do for that? You think about the multiple stakeholders and the users who would be using it, and like the police department comes to your mind, or the everyday, the normal people, the citizens come to your mind who might like to use the app, or probably the judiciary, or the lawyers, or so these are the kind of people that they are quite complex in their nature, in their needs, and you really don't know how to sort of give in your own input. Like, you really don't have any idea that these are stakeholders with such diverse needs. I don't think interview would be a good option. So when you have a lot of unknowns involved, you may like to arrange a workshop where you collect all of these stakeholders together, and for a certain time period, like for 2 to 3 hours, and there you ask them for an in-depth requirement of the crime tracking app. So meeting with multiple stakeholders, encouraging stakeholder collaboration, and defining the requirements concurrently. Now, because these are different stakeholders with having such a variety of the ways that they deal with crimes, so they will be coming up with a multitude of ideas, right? So it's really important that you have a facilitator role there. Now, if you're a business analyst, even your book suggested that it's important that you don't play the dual role of being both a business analyst as well as a facilitator, because that can be a clash of roles, right? So the facilitator would basically, you would collect all these stakeholders, you would ask them to come in a room, there would be a whiteboard, there would be sticky notes, so you would ask them to give, write their ideas, and you sit there for 2 to 3 hours, and there would be a collection of different kinds of ideas. And as a facilitator, you would obviously in the beginning provide an agenda as to what mobile tracking app, that why you have gathered here, number one, and you provide a clear guideline so that you don't waste those 3 hours for yourself and for these people. So, and I think as a facilitator, it's really important that you come up with prepare with a list of outputs that you are seeking, right? As you're thinking about what the mobile tracking app, what can be some of the features. Yeah, and you know, they can be civilians, police officers, judiciary, and they all interact with each other as well, all put on their ideas. So as it says here, that it can be quite resource intensive. So, so it's, yeah. So I think I gave you an example, and that can help you identify where a workshop would be more feasible than holding an interview. So a really good idea, useful tips for having workshops, that you please enforce all the ground rules before, so that there's no time wasted on extra items. And then you have all the team roles assigned before that. There's a facilitator, there's a scribe who is going to be writing all the interaction taking place, and you make sure that they stay in scope. And then there's this term called parking lot. So parking items in a workshop would be the off-topic items that can be a distraction from the main topic, right? So if a participant comes up with a topic that is really not directly associated with your mobile tracking app, so just in order to show them respect that they have chipped in their idea, you can use another category called the parking lot and put their idea over there. Time boxing again is really important. We have to avoid the idea of trapping, this trap of spending too much time on one agenda, one item on the agenda, and then ignoring the rest. So we really need to time box all the agenda items so that everything gets discussed. And yeah, keeping everyone engaged. So these were some of the useful tips. I'm going to work from here next time. And I think I would like to just call it off for now.